We hired 150 people, and we ran their food operation in the club level. With that knowledge, we were able to see that we weren't just creating an app for Chris to order a hot dog to his seat. That's great. We want to give these people the ability to order, but how do we get that food out? We've got logistical challenges. We've got throughput challenges. We've got lines that are created by dads trying to figure out what credit card they want and asking their 6 kids what they want to eat whenever they get to the front of the line. It's just creating these tremendous headaches. And then you've got these kitchens that haven't been updated in 60 years, right? And so we started redoing all of that, and we built our software around that. And then COVID hits.
The number of cases soaring just today.
It is a no-fan Saturday.
This was the moment COVID-19 changed sports as we knew it.
We're dead. We're dead in the water. We're a company that's focused on live sports and entertainment and events. What's going to happen?
Welcome to Forging the Future, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, Aaron Knape. Aaron is the co-founder and CEO of Rivalry Tech, a revolutionary order fulfillment technology for various sectors, from restaurants to stadiums and beyond. Join us as we delve into his journey into entrepreneurship and scaling a leading technology company here in Houston. Welcome, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Speaking of Houston, tell me a little bit about your background and your roots here.
Yeah, I grew up down in Alvin, Texas, so home of Nolan Ryan, so I had that sports background in me for a while, I guess. And grew up, went to Texas A&M, which didn't have any choice to. I was brainwashed to go there from a young age. and stayed in Houston and went to Rice University for my MBA. So
just collecting all of the Texas colleges and
getting all the best Texas colleges, yeah.
Well, what led you then to dive into entrepreneurship? You grew up in a sports town. You went to college, and then you went to Rice for your MBA.
Yeah.
So was it always a goal, or?
Yeah, my parents kind of instilled that in me at an early age. You know, my father was a large animal veterinarian down there in Houston, and my mom ran the office. And so I got to see them build their practice, be very successful at that, and be independent. And, you know, when I got out of A&M, I went to work at a large corporation and, you know, just saw that there was limited upward mobility there, right? The more you worked, the harder you worked. Didn't mean that you were going to get, you know, that commensurate or that exponential payback. And the more I went through that path, the more I started to go towards the entrepreneurial lean. And so went back to Rice to best equip myself. I looked at various colleges, and Rice just had such a tremendous program and network and campus. And 15 years out of school now continues to be one of the best choices I've ever made.
I see you got your Rice Owl socks on today.
I do have my Rice Owl socks, yeah.
What inspired the creation of Rivalry? Was that your first company out of the Rice MBA, or what?
Yeah, well, you know, to go back to that entrepreneurial journey, I had gone to work for a very small company. They were doing maybe about $500,000 a year in sales. It was a blast-resistant, air-inflated structure building. And it's very small, but it was very innovative. And I thought, well, this might be a safe way to get into it. They had a large engineering client who had already started using their product. And so I joined them, took over sales and marketing for them, opened up their European channels, lived over there with them, and then came back and took over as president. And we took the company from about $500,000 to about $20 million in the time that I was president.
Over what period of time was that?
That was over about 5 years.
5 years.
So really enjoyed that. So I kind of had that bug, and that's when I went back. I got the Rice degree, was really, preparing myself. And, Rivalry came about because my partner, Marshall Law, one of my co-founders, was at an Astros-Dodgers World Series game back in 2017. And he missed that home run ball because he was waiting in line with his kids to get a hot dog and a Coke. And it's funny, you can go back to the highlight reel and you can see the empty seats as the home run ball lands over it. So he texted me that night and said, we've got to fix this. Like, we've got to do something different. And so that's how we started building it, right? There was an obvious gap in the market. Even though it was 2017 and the iPhone had been around for a while and we were used to having this, this powerful tool in our pocket, we weren't using it for that purpose. And so we jumped all in And of course, that's when we ran across our third co-founder, Craig Sakani, who you know well. And he came on board to help us with the tech side of it.
Now, that got started right before COVID then, right?
Yeah.
So that might have been a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it was both a challenge and it was a blessing all at once, right? Right before COVID, we had just done our biggest season with the Houston Texans and Aramark. So, as we were scaling that business, we got started at Rice University. We brought on the Sugarland Skeeters, now the Space Cowboys. And we had the really good opportunity and fortune to be put in front of just a wonderful man, Jamie Roots, who was president of the Houston Texans at the time, since passed on. But he gave us a shot. He put us in front of Aramark and said, hey, these guys have something different. They have a way that they integrate this mobile technology and helps your kitchens run better. And essentially Aramark said, it's not going to work. It doesn't work. They were very, very skeptical. But they gave us a shot anyway, because Jamie was very convincing. We were very convincing. And it worked really well. And so that season right before COVID, 2019, as we're winding that down, we hired 150 people and we ran their food operation in the club level. And so with that knowledge, we were able to see that we weren't just creating an app for Chris to order a hot dog to his seat, right? Because Aramark wasn't wrong. That's great. We want to give these people the ability to order, but how do we get that food out, right? We've got logistical challenges. We've got throughput challenges. We've got lines that are created by dads trying to figure out what credit card they want and asking their 6 kids what they want to eat whenever they get to the front of the line. It's just creating these tremendous headaches. And then you've got these kitchens that haven't been updated in 60 years, right? Their processes. And so we started redoing all of that and we built our software around that. And then COVID hits. And we say, man, we are, there's about 2 weeks there where we're like, we're dead. We're dead in the water. We are a company that's focused on live sports and entertainment and events. What's going to happen? And, it took about 2 weeks. It was right around spring break in 2020. And 2 weeks and maybe a bottle or two of nice scotch and tequila to help us, brainstorm a little bit. But we figured out that it was going to be a big opportunity for us because live sport was going to come back, right? There was no doubt in our mind. And we were going to be there to facilitate the return. In other words, we were there to help mitigate lines. We were there to help reduce crowds, increase that convenience factor so that people actually didn't have to leave their seats or their pods back then, right? They could just sit in their pods and we would have people bring them food. And based on that, we were able to do 2 really crucial things in our growth. One was we found a lot of investors that believed in that story and continue to believe in that vision. And we raised a couple $1 million. And then we got an agreement with Major League Baseball because we went to them and said, what is it you really want? What are you concerned about when it comes back to opening up these stadiums? And all those things I just mentioned were top of the list. And so we built that for them. And we came out better than before, much stronger company than before COVID.
Well, tell me a little bit about being a small startup and approaching a large company like Aramark and convincing them. You said they were skeptical.
Yeah.
He was like, hey, we've got this technology. We think we can solve a pain point. How do you actually tip the scale where they'll actually do a trial with you or start using your product or paying you? Yeah.
Craig, as a co-founder, taught us the value of a really good MVP, right? That minimum viable product. And so we really dug in with Aramark. Like, what are the 1 or 2 things you really want to see happen? What are the 1 or 2 pieces of data that we have to validate that's going to cause you to give us that next step, right? Because we had this, all these ideas about what we wanted it to do, but that was all irrelevant. And so, for Aramark, it was increase revenue, just get people to buy more. And so we validated that with them. We showed them the data. They were still skeptical. And so we kept going. And finally, they couldn't deny the data. And they said, okay, you do have something here. And that's when they started giving us bigger projects like running the whole club, right? Hiring the 150 runners and kitchen staff to come in. And
was that data generated through a trial actually at the stadium with Aramark, or was that with someone else?
So the first trial, they just gave us the 2 end zones, which is only about 5,000 seats. Mm-hmm. And they gave us, we were essentially completely standalone. They gave us a couple of big tubs full of beer and let us turn on the app. And by the 3rd game, they couldn't keep us stocked with enough beer. Like we were just selling beer like crazy. We taught them new things, right? There was the CONCACAF Gold Cup, the soccer match that they held back in, I guess it was 2019 at NRG. And they said, we're not going to turn on the platform, the app, because this is a cash crowd. And that ended up, we convinced them to let us turn it on anyway. We were going to turn it on anyway, whether they wanted us to or not. And that ended up being the biggest game for us to date, because whether you're a cash society or a digital society or whatever your demographic uses, they all hate lines. And once they figured out that they could get their beer faster by using an app than standing in line and paying cash, they used it. So it was, little pilots like that convinced them to let us go bigger and bigger. And so, but to be honest, we actually had to fake it till you make it, right? Back to your question, the core of your question, being a small company and approaching these guys. We ended up getting the New York Mets, one of the best compliments I've ever gotten as a company, as a startup. And we went through the whole season. I think that was 2021, right? They were scaling up. We learned a lot. And it's the last home game. I'm there with them. Everyone's leaving the stadium, shutting down the lights. And the head of technology at the time, he said, you guys really did a great job. Like, you crushed it this season. You exceeded all of our expectations. But I got to tell you, I would not have hired you guys if I'd have known how small you were. He said, I'm glad I did, and I would do it again now. But he said, we had no idea. And they didn't know until the end of the season, right? They didn't know that we only had 3 developers and a couple of offshore people, and that we only had 1 operations guy and myself and Marshall.
Why don't you think they knew?
So we did a lot of things, I think, that helped us project that big company image, right?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, we were always honest. I want to make that clear. Mm-hmm. But, we had our development team, and they would work with our CTO and our project manager, and they would put the rest out to everybody else. The lady that does our legal for us, Nicole Moss, does a tremendous job. So when we're getting into master services agreements, contracts, those are some of the most important things you can do to put forth a good foot, right? Craig, our tech team, had us all buttoned up on our security compliance, our PCI compliance. So I guess to answer your question, we didn't give them any reason to question our size, because we had great legal documents, great security in place, and great operational methodologies. And so as long as all of that worked, there were really no issues. So.
Yeah, I found that in my own journey, right? So I started SoftTech out of the house and was working with large enterprises like Compaq and HP and Disney. And I was always also a little concerned about the fact of if they've really understood how small I really was, or that I was running it out of a house 30 years ago, when back then that meant you weren't even big enough to do business with those companies, right?
Right.
And so, and again, never lied about it, but didn't give them a reason to really dig into that further.
Yeah.
Right? And so, and I always view that as a business API in a way, right? You have your website, your business card, your stationery, your contracts, your email addresses, sales@softtech.com. Everything is like interfaced to how a big company works. Mm-hmm. And then later you just scale behind that, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And to that point, I think the most important thing we did is that we executed, and we executed above and beyond their expectations. Mm-hmm. And as a founder, especially as a founder of a small company, that's a grind. But the success that comes with that is just huge, right? We will figure it out. And I think that's probably the biggest thing we built with those clients, the Airmarks of the world, is the trust. Mm. They know that they can give us something and we're going to get it done. They know that they can come to us and say, we have a fully automated robotic kitchen and we don't have any way to interface with the guests or ourselves. Can you build that? And we'll say, sure, we can build it. And we have. So it's the trust factor is the number one thing I think that's set us apart, right? Even big companies realize that size isn't always a factor. It's capability.
Yeah, it's an important point about trust. Because it turns out if you do what you said, when you said, for how much you said, clients come back to you. Right. And a lot of companies can get a big contract with a big logo. Yep. But can you get the second, third, and fourth?
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to.
Talk a little bit about how you approach these big companies. You mentioned Aramark, you mentioned Major League Baseball, you mentioned the Mets, and you got the compliment from the Mets. I think a lot of people are intimidated when it comes to, being a smaller startup and approaching these large companies, or not even really knowing where to start. I mean,
Yeah.
you pick up the phone and call the Mets. Hey, guys, I got something for you. How did
Yeah.
you get a contract with the Mets?
It's interesting because when you get into the world of technology and when you're doing things that other people haven't done, you have to sit back and realize, well, they don't know what they're doing either, right? It doesn't matter how big they are, how sophisticated they are, how much they think they know or they say they think they know. You're going to be able to teach them something, right? There's a reason that Aramark doesn't have its own mobile ordering platform. There's a reason they don't have their own in-house, kitchen software. It's because they've tried it before, and that's not what they want to be the best at. And so when you take a step back and you realize the Mets just want to be the best at two things, right? Baseball and fan entertainment. They're not trying to be the best at, again, mobile ordering logistics. And so when you get into that mindset, you can sit in front of anybody. I'll give you a great story. The very first time we met Aramark, we sat it was with Jamie Roots, and it was at NRG Stadium in the boardroom. And they walked in and they sat down across from us and they said, mobile ordering is BS, except they didn't shorten it. Mm. And I thought, well, that's great. This I don't even know where this meeting goes. Like, this meeting is over. And Marshall just leans over casually and goes, it's because you're doing it wrong. And they said, okay. And it turns out they were. And it turns out that after we built that trust, they knew that we knew what we were talking about. And
how do you get that meeting, though? I mean, how do you sit at the table for them to tell you it's BS?
We used every channel in our network that we could to get that meeting. And the other side of that is we've learned that there's multiple avenues into a venue. And we're really good at just using that network, right? Who do we know? Who do we not know? How do we get in front of them? How do we get that meeting? And so that's helped us get, meetings with everybody from, the head of technology at the Mets, the head of technology for Aramark. We've met the founders of DoorDash. I mean, SeatGeek. I mean, there's just a lot of people where if you want to meet them, you write that name on a piece of paper and you just figure it out. I wish I could say there's a methodology to it, but it really is just trying to figure out, how can I get to that person? Who do I know? Who do I not know?
I think a lot of people do get stopped by just, well, who am I to reach out to these companies? I watched the pseudo documentary last night about Flamin' Hot Cheetos.
Oh yeah,
right.
It's a good one. Yeah.
The guy was a janitor working at Doritos for 10 years, and he was the one that came up with the concept, and then called the CEO.
Yeah.
And there were so many other people at the company that were unhappy with him that he actually did that because he jumped over so many people.
Yeah.
He made the phone call. The CEO actually answered the call, and then he actually got a presentation.
Yeah.
Or the ability to, or a first meeting to meet with the CEO and make his pitch.
That's a great point, because the other side of that is they're going to want to hear what you have to say if it's innovative and if it's different, right? Like a smart leader, especially at these large companies, they know that they don't know everything. They know that there's value in these other relationships. I'll give you one I'm working on right now if you want an example.
Sure.
We had the really good fortune. There's already a connection, so maybe it's like cheating. But we buy kiosks from Samsung, and we use them in our healthcare facilities and others. And we had our kiosk and our software at a conference in Spain last week. And the Samsung group sent us a picture, and it's the CEO of Samsung Electronics is using our kiosk and showing, other clients how to use it. Mm-hmm. So that's my next connection, is I'm going to figure out how to get in front of the CEO of Samsung and just ask him how he liked it.
Nice.
So
I did something similar where I wanted to license the Nerf name, and okay, I'm going to reach out to Hasbro, and then I'm in New York at Toy Fair meeting with Hasbro in the room with like Alec Baldwin, who's pitching some toy, and of course I look like security tried to kick me out because even though I was probably in my late 20s or 30s, I looked like I was 16 in a suit. Like, what are you doing here? Get out of here. We got people like Alec Baldwin in here. But, I licensed the Nerf logo, the Nerf name, in order to do a video game so I could try to get Atari.
That's
right?
awesome.
But, you never know what'll happen, what can happen if you actually try.
But that's another great point, right? We happen to have one friend who was at the Texans who happened to help us get Aramark. And once we had Aramark, they helped us get the Mets. The Mets helped us get the Red Sox. The Red Sox helped us get the interest of Comcast Business, who is now, as you know, an investor and a huge partner. And Comcast Business is helping us get these other connections. And so you have to start somewhere, right? You don't, if you don't see the clear path to where you want to be, just know that it's there and there is a way to get there. You just have to figure it out.
Leverage the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
That's right. Exactly.
That's the secret. You're like one. I've done that before where you look, well, I'm one person away from knowing like the president or whoever of the United States, right? There's like basically one intro and the network effects of just one level down, much less two, is just huge.
Exactly.
Okay, you talked a little bit about COVID and how you went for sports, and this is where you thought you were going to dive into, and you had Aramark and major league teams, and everything's going great, but then you had to pivot. Yeah.
So, it was an interesting time. We love sports. We love, especially the sports that have a lot of games, like Major League Baseball has 80 plus games, et cetera. But we always knew we wanted to go to these other verticals. The question was just when. And so a couple of things happened that really said, okay, now is the right time to pivot. The first is that Aramark called us and said, hey, you guys have done a great job building this software and hardware for us for, professional sports stadiums, right? It's worked. Do you think you could do it for another vertical? And at the time, that specific vertical was healthcare. Could you do it for hospitals? A good example of where we're at today is one of their clients in the Med Center, Methodist, has 11 buildings. They've got about 8 cafes, cafeterias, coffee shops. They're all over Houston, not just in the Med Center. And they've got long lines, right? In the morning, at lunch, et cetera. And so we said, sure, we can build that. And so we did. And so that was kind of the leaping off point to get us there. And then a couple of other things really started to come into focus for us that said, okay, maybe sports isn't the only market you should focus on. One was sponsorship dollars, right? As we got bigger, teams started to say, hey, you should pay us to be in our stadium now. And generally that number that they wanted us to pay them was between 5 to 10 times more than we would make. Now, the challenge for us there is that we're not trying to make money outside of the stadium. It's not a great advertisement for us, right? We're not one of these delivery companies where if Chris uses it once at Minute Maid, he's going to go home and use it again at his office or at his home or for a business lunch. That's not our market. And so we can't play that game. And I personally don't think it's a great game anyway, right? The ROI is just not there. The other reason we needed to shift is because we realized that professional sports was about the only sporting event that made sense, right? From a revenue standpoint. But even then, it's challenged. It's very seasonal, very cyclical. And there's only about 120 teams, right? 4 major leagues, 120 teams. That's not a TAM. That's not a total addressable market that investors get excited about, or even that we get excited about, quite frankly. And so when the opportunity came to move to these other verticals, we said absolutely. And we got really, really lucky there because we built that platform for the hospitals, the mobile ordering app, the kiosk, the back of house management software, and other things that also work in these other verticals, right? The quick serve restaurants, the fast food vertical, the hotel, the resort, the casino vertical, higher education, business dining. That platform is much different and much more agile than what we originally built for sports stadiums. So it's been a good pivot, much, much larger, right? Millions of restaurants in the United States, tens of thousands of hotels versus 120 professional teams, right? Much more attractive market. On top of that, we're learning about all the other benefits of these markets, right? A lot less lift. Gearing up for Fenway Park for baseball season, it's a lot of work, right? You're managing multiple huge stakeholders, Major League Baseball, the team, Aramark. With a quick serve restaurant, maybe an IT guy, so.
Probably a lot more fun to be in Fenway, but not so great from a revenue perspective.
Yeah, not so great from a revenue perspective, right? It's interesting. We'd rather have a $50,000 fast food restaurant because we can go get 10 of those really, really quickly, right?
So you're targeting both healthcare and restaurants or hotels, right?
Hotels, right? Yeah. So we're primarily focusing on fast food restaurants and hotels. And then we have healthcare as well. But the fast food restaurant space is in a massive crunch for automation and a massive crunch for mobile ordering, for kiosks right now. There's a massive labor shortage. Minimum wage rates are going through the roof. And so they're really struggling, especially these small franchisees that operate on the margin anyway. How do they keep quality service, quality product without, raising their price? You're already starting to see news stories about, McDonald's is getting pushback on increased prices. So,
well, let's talk a little bit about automation and AI and how this impacts the future here.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be a big shift with people doing jobs that AI and kiosks can do instead, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, we are just at the beginning of a massive revolution in the restaurant, fast food, commercial kitchen space right now. It's moving faster than we ever thought it would. As far as our role goes in it, our tagline has been modernizing that order fulfillment process. And we're really working to remain true to that, right? We know how to build an app that you can use. We know how to build a kiosk interface. Where the challenge is and where we are really focusing on and separating ourselves is how are we modernizing that process? And so back to your point, let's start with AI, right? We're working with and we're going to be implementing AI two ways into our solution. One is that guest experience, right? Like when you walk up, if you think about it right now, a kiosk is an anonymous interaction, right? It's an anonymous transaction. The restaurants, whoever's using it, they don't have any idea who you are. We're working with tools and we're integrating with tools right now. Palm identification, which you may use at Whole Foods, tells us who you are, tells us, load your wallet, load your preferences, load your history, all of those things. So now you've got this personalized experience.
Good morning, Mr. Yakamoto.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly.
From Minority Report.
Yeah. And then you've got the facial authentication, right? Still some concerns around the privacy issues there, but I think you're starting to see the comfort level really increase with that. And so it's interesting for us. You hear about, some of these complaints. Well, we're going to lose all personalization as we replace people with kiosks, et cetera. I think it's going to be the opposite. I think that, when you walk into a fast food restaurant now, does that server behind the counter, do they know your name? Do they know what you like to eat? Do they probably know what you want, right? Do they have your wallet on file? Are you able just to check out, faster than you would with a human? So I would argue that we're actually going to create a better, more personalized experience. And we're not years away from that. We're months away from that right now. So it's a really interesting thing. The other part of the AI for us, when we're looking at scaling out with thousands of these fast food restaurants and you're dealing with thousands of franchisees, you have to be able to help them implement it and install it quickly. And so call centers, operational personnel, I don't think those are going to be as efficient as they used to be, especially at scale. And so we're working with that. And then you've got the robotics, the really neat automation, right? So right now, here in Houston, we have a fully automated robotic kitchen that leverages our platform, right? The robot takes raw food, right? Chicken, pasta, other ingredients, puts it in a big cooker, cooks it, and you get this fresh meal. But the robot does not have the ability to take your order, to communicate to you that the order is ready, to tell you what locker it's in. It doesn't have the ability to put it in a delivery robot and tell it where to go. On the other end, it doesn't have the ability to generate reports for Aramark, right? Or whoever the operator is. Doesn't have the ability to manage inventory, doesn't have the ability to take payment processing. We do all of that, right? So the Rivalry Tech platform encompasses that entire ecosystem. The robot just runs a line into us to oversimplify it, right? We take care of the communication. We take care of all the reporting on the back end for them. And we're seeing a lot of that, right? Commercial kitchens and hospitals throughout the United States have a 20 to 25% shortage of staff, right? That's one example. They just can't get enough people to make these meals. You look at the fast food industry, right? They too have a shortage of labor for these highly repetitive functions. On top of that, California just approved a wage increase to $20 an hour for fast food workers. And so now you've got this bind, again, where these franchisees who are struggling to meet their margin targets or to make money are now having to pay even more. And how do you pass that on to the guest? So wherever we can come in and help streamline that, help streamline those costs, give guests a better experience, create a better experience for the operators, that's where we fit the best.
Yeah, I think both, solving a problem from an automation perspective for jobs that already are hard to fill and jobs that maybe people don't want. And then also, I think looking ahead, a lot of people think that there's a population explosion problem going on, where I lean more toward the other stats where it shows that we're going to peak around 9 billion people and drop to about 6 billion, right?
Really?
And so there's going to be fewer and fewer workers available to do some of these more, repetitive tasks or jobs that maybe people don't want. And if we can replace that with automation, I think is a good thing. And we're not stealing anybody's jobs.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
There's actually there's no one there that wants to do that job, for one thing. And then second, I think that you're on the right path where, that personalization and customization, so many restaurants don't even do this now. The only one really comes to mind for me is one of my favorites, which is Eddie V's, which we would go to. They actually pay attention to what you order. Mm-hmm. And they remember it. The waiters also look at that information when you come in, and so they understand. And then not only that, they pair you with the waiter you had last time, if at all possible. Yeah. Right? So like if they're working that night, they're your waiter. They know how you like your food. Do you want the same thing that you had last time? Do you want the same bottle of wine? Yep. Do you want the same appetizer? And then what's interesting to me is DoorDash was on this path during COVID, and they had it where you could just reorder what you ordered. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, hey, we ordered the same thing from this restaurant every single time with little fail, right? Yeah. Well, then they kind of threw that out the door for some reason, and then they just tried to put like highlight the things you ordered. And it's probably something behind that where they're trying to get the ticket size out, get you to try new things or something.
Order more,
for me, it was like just not very convenient for me to spend more time trying to recreate the order that I had with the exceptions and no lettuce on this or whatever it is that you're doing. And so being able to go to even a McDonald's or something, I've been to their kiosk, right? And you're standing there, and it takes me 10 minutes to go through it.
Reordering.
Yeah. It's like I'm there with my grandkids and they have it the same way every single time.
That's exactly right.
Give me the hamburger without the ketchup, without that pickle or whatever it is. And I want to get in and out of that, right? Yeah. And so there's just so much further we're going to be able to go. Yeah. And then all these restaurants, they don't have the technology to do it. They're like restaurants. They know how to do food. They want to have an experience. They need a partner like Rivalry in order to make it happen. Yeah. Right?
We're only months away. We could be weeks away, right? If the proper resources for you to walk in and it says, hey, Chris, what do you want to eat? And you're like, well, I've got my grandkids with me. Mm-hmm. And it does the, hamburger with no pickles and ketchup, right? We're not that far away. And, it's interesting because, you can take that level of service you get at Eddie V's and you can have it at fast casual, you can have it at quick serve restaurant. It's not a person, and Eddie V's, you get a person, right? That's what you pay for, and that's the experience. But you don't expect that at these other places, but we can give that to you in some form anyway. So it's pretty neat.
Well, I like your example of you go to the cashier, they know nothing about you, and then you have to re-educate them about all the ways you want your order a little customized. Yeah. It's just interesting that it's taken this long to get to that point.
The reason it's happening a lot faster now, of course, it comes back to money, right? Mm-hmm. People also are ordering more. They're ordering about 30% more via kiosks, and that's without any sort of AI suggestions or upselling right now. They just order more, right? Maybe it's to your point, right? They don't want to get supersized because they don't like saying it out loud or whatever. But on a kiosk, I'm guilty of it. I'll hit 2 next to the McRib when I see it. So
well, that's interesting. Go from everyone. They try to simplify it down to I'll have a number 2, right? Yeah. But that doesn't really allow any of that customization you're talking about,
right?
Right, where now it is possible, but really envisioning something where, like you said, it doesn't start with that. Where are you now in, you're coming to this restaurant a multiple of different ways. I'm by myself, or I'm here on a date with my wife, or I'm here with my grandkids. And that's really where you want to start with what are you doing today? Yeah. Right? I'm with my grandkids. Okay, would you like your grandkid order that you like? Yep. You want to add anything to that? No. We're good to go. You want the same credit card? Yes, please. Okay, go sit down at table 12. Thank you very much. So that faster.
Yeah, absolutely. It's possible.
Tell me a little bit about, founding a business here, utilizing the resources in Houston. Any feedback?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. We got our start 6 years ago. And, Houston, and especially the entrepreneurial scene, was in such a state of flux back then, right? You had Station Houston back then, which was kind of around. It kind of wasn't. It was on its way out the door. You had a lot of these other upstart groups coming together. You had the Canon. You had others that were, starting to come about. And so for us, it was kind of fascinating. We were at the very beginning of kind of the new wave of entrepreneurs and innovation in the city. And so, starting with the Canon, and working with them for a while, and then when soft tech came about, you guys were kind of this breath of fresh air, because we'd seen a lot of traditional, private equity type mindsets around the city, right? I mean, and that's what you're going to get when the city that's primarily focused on oil and gas and large healthcare, really long play investment type stuff. And they just weren't used to companies like us, where we had a much shorter, window that we were looking to achieve. And a different business, right? So for us, it was really challenging at first to get those funds. And we had to really, really, kind of scrape and turn over a lot of stones to find people who, believed in the vision, who were looking to diversify outside of oil and gas, who were looking to diversify outside of healthcare. And that continues to ebb and flow even to today, right? I mean, depending on the price of oil, you'll see some of your larger investors are putting it over here, or they're putting it over there, right? It's a lot like the green energy.
Is it mostly high net worth individuals, or is there some venture firms, or where were you? You've raised a few $1 million now.
We've raised a few million. We've raised from, essentially 3 venture firms, and counting, soft tech as one of those. But there's not as many in Houston as you would think. And it becomes challenging because once you've met all of them once or twice, and you've told your story once or twice, you know how it goes. You have to come back with some really significant changes or growth the following year. And so, especially in the most recent funding environment, as more of them start to kind of turtle up, if you will, it's been really challenging. And so we've done a better job, and we've had to go farther and farther outside. So we're now working with firms on the West Coast. We're working with firms on the East Coast for potential investment, where you're still seeing a lot of activity. That's the problem in a place like Houston, when you don't have a massive investment pool to begin with. When it dries up like it did, the pool in Houston becomes a lot smaller, even though the pool in San Diego and San Francisco and LA, they're becoming smaller. They're still exponentially massive, right? The same on the East Coast, the same in Austin. And so, our kind of whole ethos has been, keep it local, raise in Houston as best as we can, and, raise outside when you have to.
You want to shout out to any of the ones that you did raise from?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so first of all, soft tech. I mean, I will say,
you dropped that name already.
I know, right? No, so we raised from Valador Partners, which was great group of guys here in town, and Sightcast, which is also another good firm here in town as well. So, and of course, we've got, a whole host of high net worth individuals and friends and family that have believed in us from the very beginning. So
that's great.
Yeah.
How do you believe Rivalry Tech is forging the future?
Well, like I said, we're modernizing that order fulfillment process, right? We have competitors out there who are saying, look, we built a mobile app and we built a kiosk. And I'm saying, look, we integrated with a fully robotic automated kitchen, and we've got delivery robots that are taking our orders out. We're working with AI to better enhance that experience, to better create the experience for just the guest who's ordering their food and the operator who's actually having to operate the system as well. So that's what differentiates us. And it's pretty exciting to see how the whole landscape is shifting and just so rapidly right now, right? So it's going to be totally different in the next 12 to 18 months.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be an interesting decade. And there's so much going on.
Oh, for sure.
We're going to see 100 years of innovation in 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's that exponential roadmap, I think, that we're all on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty exciting.
Well, I've got my avocado socks on today for the sEATz app itself. You got your rice socks on.
I love it.
I've got some new socks for you. And they are, look, there's French fries on them and everything.
Oh, I love it, man. My fast food socks. I can wear these. So.
There you go.
That's great.
Well, thanks for being on the show, Aaron, and sharing your journey.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Chris.